Bordelaise sauce is one of the classics of French cuisine that is typically served as an accompaniment to steak. The flavor comes from the dry red Bordeaux wine reduced with shallots and a well-made demi-glace and rounded out with some fat in the form of bone marrow. The sauce is kind of a cross between a Bordelaise and another French sauce called a Mathurini, which is based on raisins. This is a great sauce for the holiday table because it's superb for pork and game meats, including smoked meats.
I've got the ingredients set up here. I've got 90 grams. This is two tomatoes from a tin, Italian tomatoes with a little bit of the juice, some juniper berries, a teaspoon of cumin seeds whole. I'm going to grind up these juniper berries in a few minutes, by the way. The raisins, 120 grams. This is from cooking pork. It's basically, it's like concentrated pork stock that I sat in the refrigerator until the fat layer separated. There's still a little bit of fat off the edge here, you can see. But this is you can use demi-glace, but the pork stock, like this rich, dark pork stock, will give you better results if you can. And what I'm going to do is I've got chicken stock here, and I'm going to stir about 2 tablespoons of this pork stock into the chicken stock. I heated the chicken stock up in the microwave, by the way, for a couple of minutes to help facilitate dissolving this. So now we have the stock for this, and all the other ingredients are going to begin heating the pan. Also, shallot back here. I gotta chop this up. Okay, the pan is hot now. You're probably wondering why I don't use the pork fat that you saw there for this. You can. It'll produce a little bit of a greasy texture in the final sauce. Usually sauces don't use animal fats. They use vegetable oil or butter because they produce better end results. But the flavor is slightly better with the pork fat, but the texture won't be. So I'm putting these the shallots in. They're just coarsely chopped. And tomatoes here. As you can see, they started caramelizing almost instantly because they had the pan quite hot. That's what you want. You really want to make an impression, first impression on these tomatoes and shallots with some heat here. Now I've reduced the heat down from, was on 8, I've reduced it down to 5. I'm going to stir this just a little bit more. And I'm going to add the cumin seeds in here and kind of toast them. It's not exactly toast them because there's definitely still some liquid in here. So it's not at the temperature of a cast iron pan that's just being heated over an open flame. But these cumin seeds are going to be cooked quite well because this is still pretty hot. It's above the boiling point of water right now. Okay, it's been another couple of minutes. You can see this is getting quite dark. It's not burnt yet, but it's getting very dark on the bottom. Now I'm going to add these raisins in. These are dried raisins. I have not soaked them ahead of time. Again, this is part of the flavor. You want to kind of caramelize the outside of the raisins. They often do this in like Oaxacan moles. You don't carry it too far though, because you don't want burnt raisins, that's for sure. In a mortar and pestle off to the side here, where you can't see, I realize, I put those juniper berries in with half a teaspoon of coarse salt to grind them up. The coarse salt acts as an abrasive. Plus a little bit of salt is going to be needed in here anyway. Okay, this looks pretty good. So now I'm going to add this stock and the juniper berries and coarse salt that were ground together. And the heat's still on 5 now. I'm going to bring this up to a simmer, and then I'm going to start scraping the bottom up to get up any of the fond that's stuck to the bottom. And in about 2 minutes here, it comes up to slow boil. And now I'm going to reduce the heat down to about 2.5. We'll just keep this at a slow simmer for a few minutes before we continue. We'll just simmer this, make sure that those raisins are fully rehydrated before we continue. Yeah, it's just coming up on 10 minutes now of simmering. I turned the heat off and I'll let this cool just a tiny bit, and then I'm going to transfer it to the cup of the stick blender. So here's the contents in the stick blender. Now this is the optional teaspoon of dried beet powder that I mentioned. It's explained in my cookbook series. You don't have to add this, but it'll add a great depth of flavor and some really nice notes in there. But it'll still be a great sauce even if you don't add that. Now I'm going to use the stick blender obviously here. It's important to use the stick blender exhaustively on it, because otherwise you won't get very much of it through the sieve. You have to really puree it in order to be able to get this to pass effectively, efficiently through the sieve. After a couple minutes of rubbing like this, you accumulate some solids that won't pass. Make sure you wipe off the bottom of the sieve, get all that in there. I cleaned this pan out, by the way, after I transferred the contents to the stick blender. So now it's clean in here. I'm going to begin heating it again. And as it begins heating, again on medium heat, I'm adding that red wine in. You want to keep it to where bubbles are breaking at the surface, like this, but it's not a rolling boil. Do not have it at a rolling boil. Turn the heat down if it starts to get boiling too vigorously. You want to reduce it like this for a little while, and then we're going to add the other last ingredients. Now we're looking for the point at which you're going to add the Madeira. And we drag a spoon across it. You see how quickly it closes up here? Not ready yet. It needs to be reduced a little bit more. Okay, after a few more minutes, when you drag the spoon across it, doesn't close up so much. It's much thicker. Now's the time I'm going to add a tablespoon of Madeira, about 15 milliliters, and a quarter teaspoon of finely ground black pepper. Reduce it just a little bit more again. We're looking for a similar stage as the last one. You can see it's too thin right now because of the Madeira. A few more minutes, it'll be thick. It's been about 2 minutes. You can see it's fairly thick again. Now I've turned the heat off. I'm going to add a tablespoon of butter to this and whisk it in. Again, no heat now. Just the residual heat in the pan.
The second volume of my cookbook is now available through Amazon and other booksellers. It covers the YouTube recipes from the last 8 months with more in-depth information. I received requests for the procedures on all recipes, and I've listened to you. Every recipe has step-by-step directions, and of course there are recipes that aren't on YouTube. But this is not just a recipe book. Far from it, as you can see from some of the topics scrolling by here. I'm certain that anyone who watches my channel and any serious cook will find this book a treasury of useful and new information you won't find anywhere else. If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link. Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.